Hi, this is Mr. Westylish, it's Westylish, and today I'm here to talk to you about the Year 8 Empire test and how you can kind of improve your current efforts and perhaps some advice for the future. The aim is for you to get onto RealSmart underneath this video and to offer 2 or 3 targets that you would give yourself if you were to retake the test, and hopefully then you can use those to improve your genuine source analysis as you move forward. Now then, the first question asks you to look at source R and asks how useful do you think the Australia and New Zealand were to the British. So what you've got to think about here is, what is it about these colonies that were good for the British? Okay. Now, if we have a look, it's also for 6 marks, and that's the first point I'd always make. Have you written 6 things? If you've written 6 things and you've maybe only got 5 right or 4, then that's all right. But if you haven't written 6 things, how can you expect to get top marks? Okay. So, Captain James Cook came to Australia for the British in 1770. They used it as a convict colony. Now, a convict is a criminal, okay, in Britain, and they were sent over to Australia to live there. And in convicts, actually, there was more criminals there, or convicts, than free settlers in 1830. Farming also prospered. Oh, I've put a line through it, but that's all right. Farming also prospered, and also there was gold, okay. Emigration from Britain increased, and Australia had a population of 100 million sheep. So there's plenty of stuff there on the Australia section to get yourselves 3 marks for Australia. Now then, New Zealand, British colony, again it mentions farming and also refrigeration. Okay, frozen products to be sent to Europe. Alright, now then, what you want to try and do is to develop that a little bit and sort of say, well, what would that mean, the refrigeration? Well, it would mean that maybe like typically lamb or mutton or any meats from New Zealand could arrive in Britain still fresh. And that meant that not only was there lots of animals in Australia, but that the food from these animals could then make it back to Britain. What you can see here is, obviously in the test you couldn't do this because somebody else might have the exam paper, but you can see how I've picked out the key words and phrases, okay? I've also checked that it's out of 6 marks, and I know that I'm going to get 3 for Australia and 3 for New Zealand. Now in source S, question 2 says, look at source S. What does this suggest to you about James Cook? Or what does it tell you about James Cook? Now let's pick a couple of the key points out. He enforced a diet which included fresh fruit and vegetables to prevent scurvy. Okay, Cook was attacked and killed by natives in Hawaii. It also says at the top in the provenance, that's this bit here, that Cook was a navigator and an explorer. Okay, and the first thing I would say is that you always want to make sure that you look at the provenance of the source. That's the bit that's above the source, sort of here. Oops, sort of here, alright, which tells you a little bit about it. Also in this tells you about his expeditions to explore the southern Pacific, okay. But the question is, what was he like, okay? So what would be a good idea would be to pick a word from it, okay, like explorer, for example. And then what you want to go on to say, well, what does that tell you about Cook, okay? So he must have been good at reading maps, for example. He must have wanted to travel. Oops. And several other things. So what I would say to you to do well on this kind of question is pick out a key word. So I've picked out explorer from the provenance, and I've then said what that tells us about him. Okay. Again, you could pick out here about his diet. All right, and sort of say, right, well, the diet, what does that tell you about him? Okay, and you can think about, well, he must obviously have been educated, he must have cared about the welfare of his men and stuff like that. So the first part of this, and I think, as I say, as a question, it's out of 5. To get into the first level, you've got to pick out the keywords, explorer, diet, navigator, and things like that. But then to get up a bit higher, you've got to try and say what that tells us about him. Added to that is this bit at the bottom here, okay, was killed by natives in Hawaii. Now, very few of you actually commented on that, but was he always popular? Did he always understand the situation? Or did he just kind of get onto Hawaii and think, oh, I'll be fine here? He obviously misread the situation and ended up being killed. So maybe he didn't always get things right, and that maybe is a little bit of a negative. But again, pick out the keywords and then explain them, and don't forget to use the provenance. Okay, so question 3, study source T, What benefits, what good things did Britain get from its empire? Now, this is a 7-mark response, okay? And you're looking to pick out 7 things. Now, it's nice and easy. First of all, I'd look for some of the big points, like a cheap supply of raw materials, okay? Then you can give me some nice examples. Cotton, jute, rubber, palm oil and nitrates. That'll always give you plenty of points. Also, it's another theme, wealthier Britons, okay? They could also enjoy exotic colonial products like silk, gold and chocolate, rice and tea. Also, you've got the point that British culture developed. Many signs of colonial influence in food, fashion and buildings. For poorer people, so there's another point. For poorer people, emigration. That's poorer people there. Emigration to the colonies was a way of escaping unemployment and poor conditions in Britain. All right, and trading competition. Okay, I put a line for it, but you know what it means. And this idea of cheap meat, wool from Australia and wheat from Canada. All right. So what I've done is I've not just listed everything, but I've tried to pick out the key points first of all, and that's the first thing. Get the key points, and then when you've got the key points, give me some examples. All right, and that's always a good thing to try and do. Get the key points, so there I see highlight them, and then give me some examples. Probably 3 key points with some examples. You've easily got 7 marks. Okay, now for question 4a, it says make a list of all the positive effects of British rule in a colony. So all the good things that Britain did. So using source use, there's a lot of information here. But what I'm looking to do is to pick out things that would have made it better for the people who lived in the colonies. So roads, canals, railways and schools always set out, okay? And that's a real positive thing, yeah? There's your 4 points and stuff like that. However, what it goes on to say is that it might not all be positive, okay? People were forced to inherit British laws, language and customs, which would have been good, but often they were forced upon them. So that goes into your 4b. All right, picking out several things. There was an Indian mutiny because of the fact that local customs were ignored. Local labour, that means people who worked there were often exploited, so maybe forced to work for very cheap wages. We took over their lands. And if there was resistance, we usually suppressed it. That means got rid of it. Some people suffered badly. In New Zealand, wars and disease reduced the Maoris from 100,000 to 35,000 in 85 years. Okay, so there's the positives there in this sort of the top half. And that's 4a, and then your negatives in the bottom half. Again, you can see I've gone through and picked out the key points. First of all from reading it, and then I'm going to put them into the sources, into the answer. Okay, now last question, 4c. Now weigh up your evidence. Do the good things outweigh the bad things? Was it good to live in the British Empire or bad? Now clearly one of the things we need to think about is balance, because you'll have just written some stuff that was positive, schools, roads, hospitals, and was negative, the fact that their cultures were ignored and sometimes they were attacked and lands were seized. So you've got both sides. And if you were to write an answer that was just, yeah, it was really good to live in the British Empire, or yeah, it was really bad to live in the British Empire, then you've got a problem because you've only seen one side of it. So the first thing is, in this, to get a decent mark out of 4, you've got to have balance. But what I like to see is to a large extent, rather than just sort of saying that it was both good and bad, which is kind of sitting on the fence, isn't it? Okay, both good and bad. What we want to try and do is sort of say to a large extent. To a large extent, it was a bad thing that lived in the British Empire, because their cultures were ignored, many of them were killed, and we just took over their lands. However, there were some good things, like hospitals being made, schools and roads to make things better for the people who lived there. Okay, that could be one answer. Or to a large extent, it was good to live in the British Empire. All right, because there was new schools, hospitals, roads and things like that, which made things better for people there. But these things came at a price, and there was lots of their cultures were ignored, and if they didn't agree with the British, they were killed and their lands seized. So you need to sort of have both sides, but you don't just want to say that's kind of, no good. Don't just say it's both good and bad. Try and use this to a large extent to try and improve your answer. Okay, thanks for listening. Bye.